The Galactic Engineering Academy's emergency landing pad was experiencing what humans would describe as one of those days. You know, the kind where a Void Weaver-class battlecruiser decides to make an unscheduled landing, essentially plummeting from the sky like a drunken Thrask elephant trying to do ballet. Professor Ethan Harper, a bright Uljarn, stood at the edge of the pad with their arms crossed in various expressions of concern, eyes glued to the ship's descent. As the Academy's senior engineering instructor, they'd seen more than their fair share of mechanical catastrophes. But this one was different. A kind of special that made their antenna twitch in ways that would likely require therapy later. "By the sacred sprockets," they muttered, watching as the ship's emergency landing system engaged with all the reliability of a melted chocolate teapot. What was once a sleek, pristine hull now looked like the result of a particularly angry artist taking out their frustration on geometric shapes. Behind them, a chorus of gasps erupted from the gathered crowd of senior engineers, the Academy's brightest minds, each holding at least 7 degrees in quantum mechanics, and probably a few more in fields with names so complicated. Even they had trouble pronouncing them. Their collective horror at the sight was so intense, it almost registered on the Academy's sensitive atmospheric monitors. "Impossible to repair," declared Chief Engineer Chase Davenport, his crystalline exoskeleton gleaming in the sunlight. "The quantum manifold is totally desynchronized from the temporal stability matrix, and the hyperdrive casing is warped by at least 0.000000 C microns." Another engineer, identified by their badge as Dr. Aiden Mitchell, head of precise measurements and even more precise opinions, added, "It's completely beyond saving." That's when Ethan Harper heard it, the sound that had been haunting their dreams ever since the exchange program started 3 months ago. Laughter. Human laughter. At the back of the crowd, standing like they'd just scored tickets to the most exciting event of the year, were the 5 exchange students from Earth's Death World engineering program. Their faces were a mix of barely contained glee and what Ethan Harper had come to recognize as their challenge-accepted expressions. Oliver Davis was already pulling out their infamous toolkit, a beat-up collection of tools that the other faculty referred to as barbaric instruments of mechanical torture. Beside them, Maxwell Reed was jotting notes in an actual paper notebook, something that always made the digital-dependent alien instructors wince. "Professor Bright Wrench," called out Sophia Turner, her voice carrying that dangerous tone of enthusiasm that often led to either brilliant solutions or spectacular explosions, sometimes both. "Permission to attempt repairs?" Ethan Harper felt their antenna droop slightly. The last time the humans had tried to fix something, they somehow got a quantum coffee maker to briefly gain sentience before it decided to retire and become a toaster. But as they gazed at the wrecked battlecruiser, then looked back at the eager faces of their human students, they realized they didn't have much choice. "May the sacred sprockets preserve us all," they sighed, making the gesture of approval with their upper right arm, while the other 3 engineers prepared to cover their visual sensors. "Permission granted." The humans' grins could have powered a small star system. The damage to the Void Weaver-class battlecruiser looked like something straight out of a spaceship horror story, assuming the author had a vendetta against proper engineering. The once immaculate quantum manifolds had been twisted into shapes that would send any topologist into an existential crisis. "Observe," Chief Engineer Chase Davenport said, his crystalline form shimmering with what could only be described as smug concern. "The hyperdrive casing has been subjected to precisely 47.3 standard gravitational units of stress, as per Regulation 7249B, subsection theta. Any deformation exceeding 42.1 units demands complete replacement with factory-certified parts." Dr. Aiden Mitchell activated their holographic analysis matrix, projecting a dizzying array of measurements and calculations into the air. Furthermore, the quantum flux capacitors are oscillating at 0.067% above standard parameters. The maintenance manual clearly... "The maintenance manual can kiss my socket wrench," muttered Oliver Davis under their breath, earning a poorly suppressed snort from Maxwell Reed. The 2 human cadets circled the ship like sharks that had just spotted something particularly interesting. their expressions growing more excited with each catastrophic system failure they uncovered. Oliver Davis pulled out their infamous diagnostic stick, a literal stick they had picked up on Earth, wrapped in copper wire, and somehow modified to detect energy fluctuations with surprising precision. "Look at this," Davis called out, pointing the stick at a particularly mangled section. "The quantum coherence is completely shot, but the base matrix is still intact." Reed was already scribbling in their paper notebook, making calculations that involved an equal mix of complex math symbols and doodles of smiling wrenches. "Yeah, and check out how the temporal stabilizers are only mostly fried. We could probably—" "Absolutely not!" Dr. Aiden Mitchell interrupted, their crystalline form vibrating with horror. "The temporal stabilizers require precise calibration with equipment that costs more than this entire academy. You can't possibly—" "We can jumpstart it with a modified coffee maker," Sophia Turner chimed in, already pulling out what appeared to be a severely altered household appliance from her backpack. The senior engineers collectively took 3 steps back, their previous experiences with human-modified coffee makers still fresh in their memory banks. Ethan Harper watched as the human students conducted what they referred to as a proper assessment, which seemed to involve a lot of tapping, squinting, and occasionally hitting various components while making thoughtful noises. "The quantum matrix is shot," announced Oliver Davis, finally standing up from where they'd been half buried in an access panel. "Completely unusable." "Agreed." Maxwell Reed nodded gravely. The alien engineers began their standard. The emergency landing pad at the Galactic Engineering Academy was having what humans might call one of those days. You know, the kind where a Void Weaver-class battlecruiser decides to land without warning, essentially crashing down from the sky like a drunken Thrask elephant attempting ballet. Professor Ethan Harper, a bright Uljarn, stood at the edge of the pad with their arms crossed in various expressions of concern, watching the ship's descent. As the senior engineering instructor of the academy, they'd seen their fair share of mechanical disasters, but this one was different, a kind of special that made their antenna twitch in ways that would likely require therapy later. "By the sacred sprockets," Ethan Harper muttered, watching the ship's emergency landing system engage, its performance reminiscent of a chocolate teapot, unreliable and fragile. What was once a sleek, immaculate hull now resembled the chaotic work of an artist with a vendetta against geometric shapes. Behind them, a chorus of gasps erupted from the gathered crowd of senior engineers, each a brilliant mind with at least 7 degrees in quantum mechanics, not to mention a few in fields with names only the most seasoned experts could pronounce. The collective horror on their faces was so intense, it could almost be measured by the Academy's sensitive atmospheric monitors. "Impossible to repair," Chief Engineer Chase Davenport declared, his crystalline exoskeleton glinting in the sunlight. "The quantum manifold is completely desynchronized from the temporal stability matrix, and the hyperdrive casing has been warped by at least 0.000000 C microns." Another engineer, identified by their badge as Dr. Aiden Mitchell, head of precise measurements and even more precise opinions, added, "This ship is a lost cause." That's when Ethan Harper heard it, the sound that had haunted their dreams ever since the exchange program began 3 months ago: laughter. Human laughter. Standing at the back of the crowd, grinning like they'd just scored front-row tickets to the most exciting show in the galaxy, were the 5 exchange students from Earth's Death World engineering program. Their expressions ranged from barely contained glee to the kind of challenge-accepted look Ethan Harper had grown familiar with. Oliver Davis was already pulling out their notorious toolkit, a battered assortment of tools that the faculty called barbaric instruments of mechanical torture. Beside them, Maxwell Reed was writing in an actual paper notebook, a sight that always made the digital-dependent alien instructors cringe. "Professor Bright Wrench," called out Sophia Turner, her voice dripping with dangerous enthusiasm, the kind that typically preceded either an inspired solution or a spectacular explosion. "Permission to attempt repairs?" Ethan Harper's antenna drooped slightly. The last time the humans had tried to fix something, they managed to make a quantum coffee maker achieve brief sentience before it chose to retire and become a toaster. But as they looked at the mangled battlecruiser, then back at the eager faces of their human students, They realized they didn't have much of a choice. "May the sacred sprockets preserve us all," they sighed, extending the gesture of approval with their upper right arm, while the others prepared to cover their visual sensors. Permission granted. The humans' grins could have powered an entire star system. The damage to the Void Weaver-class battlecruiser looked like something straight out of a spaceship horror story, assuming the author had a particular hatred for proper engineering. The once pristine quantum manifolds had been twisted into shapes that would make any topologist question their life choices. "Observe," Chief Engineer Chase Davenport declared, his crystalline form shimmering with what could only be described as smug concern. "The hyperdrive casing has been subjected to exactly 47.3 standard gravitational units of stress, according to Regulation 7249B, subsection theta. Any deformation exceeding 42.1 units requires immediate replacement with factory-certified parts." Dr. Aiden Mitchell activated their holographic analysis matrix, projecting a dizzying array of measurements and calculations into the air. Furthermore, the quantum flux capacitors are oscillating at 0.067% above standard parameters. The maintenance manual clearly states, "The maintenance manual can kiss my socket wrench," muttered Oliver Davis, earning a suppressed snort from Maxwell Reed. The two human cadets circled the ship like sharks that had just spotted something particularly interesting, their expressions growing more excited with each catastrophic failure they uncovered. Oliver Davis pulled out their infamous diagnostic stick, a literal stick they had picked up on Earth, wrapped in copper wire, and somehow modified to detect energy fluctuations with surprising accuracy. "Look at this," Davis called out, pointing their stick at a particularly mangled section. "The quantum coherence is completely shot, but the base matrix is still intact." Reed was already scribbling in their paper notebook, making calculations that seemed to be half mathematical symbols and half doodles of smiling wrenches. "Yeah, and check out how the temporal stabilizers are only mostly fried. We could probably—" "Absolutely not," Dr. Aiden Mitchell interrupted, their crystalline form vibrating with shock. "The temporal stabilizers require precise calibration with equipment that costs more than this entire academy. You can't possibly—" "We can jumpstart it with a modified coffee maker," Sophia Turner interjected, already pulling out what appeared to be a seriously modified household appliance from her backpack. The senior engineers collectively took 3 steps back, their previous experiences with human-modified coffee makers still fresh in their memory banks. Ethan Harper watched as their human students began what they called a proper assessment, which involved a lot of tapping, squinting, and occasional whacking of various components while making thoughtful noises. "The quantum matrix is shot," announced Oliver Davis, finally emerging from the depths of an access panel. "Completely unusable." "Agreed," Maxwell Reed nodded seriously. The alien engineers began their standard. The vibrations of "we told you so" were only interrupted as Oliver Davis continued. "But if we reverse the polarity, reroute the power through that coffee maker Sophia Turner modified, and maybe hit it really hard with this hammer." They pulled out a suspiciously well-worn tool. "We can probably have it running better than new in about 3 hours. 2 if we skip lunch," added Maxwell Reed with a grin. "Absolutely not." Velaw's crystalline form practically flickered with distress. "The regulations specifically prohibit the use of percussion-based maintenance techniques." Ethan Harper felt their antenna twitch as they watched their human students exchange that look, the one that always came before either a brilliant solution or a spectacular disaster, usually both. "Professor Bright Wrench," Oliver Davis said formally, though their eyes were practically sparkling with barely contained mischief. "Requesting permission to implement alternative repair protocols?" And there it was, the moment Ethan Harper knew would haunt their performance review for the next solar cycle. But they'd seen enough of human engineering miracles to know what would happen next. "Permission granted," Ethan Harper said, already reaching for their emergency insurance documentation. "But please, for the love of the sacred sprockets, try not to make it achieve sentience this time." The humans' grins only grew wider, and their collective innocent expressions did nothing to ease Ethan Harper's concern. The gathered alien engineers watched in growing horror as the human cadets began unpacking their toolkits. If the sight of Oliver Davis's hammer had caused alarm, The appearance of their complete repair arsenal was enough to send several junior engineers running for the safety of the quantum physics lab. "Is that adhesive tape?" Dr. Aiden Mitchell's voice reached a pitch that no crystalline life form should have ever been capable of, as Maxwell Reed triumphantly held up a roll of what was unmistakably duct tape. "The silver material used by primitive societies to temporarily bind?" Dr. Aiden Mitchell stammered. "Duct tape," Sophia Turner corrected cheerfully. "The universe's second greatest invention right after WD-40. She held up a can of the latter like it was a holy relic. The humans had laid out their tools in what they called a proper workspace, though to the alien observers, it resembled more of an archaeological display of mechanical barbarism. Alongside the infamous hammer and duct tape were an assortment of items that made the senior engineers' sensory organs twitch: paper clips, rubber bands, something called a zip tie, and what appeared to be a modified toaster with quantum flux detector Mark IV written on it in marker. "First," announced Oliver Davis, wielding their hammer with disturbing enthusiasm, "we need to realign the quantum manifold. Traditional methods would require a complete replacement, but I found that a precisely calibrated application of kinetic force—" "They're going to hit it?" whispered V-Law in horror to Ethan Harper. "They're going to hit a 47 million credit quantum manifold with a primitive impact tool?" "A percussive maintenance initiated," shouted Oliver Davis, bringing the hammer down with what the humans insisted was scientific precision. The resulting clang echoed across the landing pad, followed by a surprisingly melodious hum as the manifold's quantum field stabilized. "That's impossible," stammered Dr. Aiden Mitchell, their crystalline form flickering in shock as their sensors confirmed the manifold was now operating at 98.3% efficiency. But the humans were just getting started. Maxwell Reed had already moved on to the temporal stabilizers, armed with the modified coffee maker and what looked suspiciously like paper clips bent into exotic shapes. "The temporal field needs a kickstart," they explained, jamming paper clips into ports that definitely weren't designed for them. "We'll use the coffee maker's heating element to generate a localized time dilation field, then stabilize it with these quantum-aligned paper clips." "Those are from the Academy's office supply cabinet," protested a junior engineer. "Quantum-aligned office supplies," Sophia Turner corrected, already soldering something that sparked ominously. "We ran them through the particle accelerator during lunch break last week." The aliens watched in collective dismay as the humans continued their work. Duct tape was applied liberally to what they insisted were non-critical structural components. The WD-40 was sprayed into mechanisms that, according to every engineering manual in the galaxy, should never come into contact with any liquid. "The hyperdrive casing's warped," Oliver Davis called from somewhere inside an access panel. "Pass me the rubber bands." "The industrial strength ones or the regular ones?" Maxwell Reed asked. "Regular, we're not animals," Oliver Davis shot back. Ethan Harper could only watch as their students proceeded to literally rubber band a hyperdrive casing back into alignment, defying several laws of physics and at least a dozen Academy regulations in the process. "Now for the tricky part," announced Sophia Turner, pulling out what looked like an ordinary plastic straw. "We need to redirect the quantum flux through the secondary systems while the primary core recalibrates." "Is that a drinking implement?" asked V-Law weakly. "Quantum flux redirect conduit," Oliver Davis corrected. "We modified it in the cafeteria. The bendy part is crucial for maintaining laminar flow." The next 20 minutes were a blur of activity that the alien observers would later struggle to describe in their reports. Somehow the combination of duct tape, paper clips, rubber bands, and strategically applied percussive maintenance was working. Systems that should have required months of delicate reconstruction were coming online, their efficiency readings climbing steadily. "They're violating at least 73 different safety protocols," muttered Dr. Aiden Mitchell, unable to look away from the mechanical heresy unfolding before them. "And that's just in the subsection about proper tool usage," Ethan Harper added, their antenna twitching as they watched Maxwell Reed successfully rewire a quantum computer using what appeared to be a paperclip and sheer audacity. "At least they haven't started singing yet," Ethan Harper murmured. Right on cue, the humans began a cheerful rendition of their repair shanty, a supposed traditional Earth song that seemed to consist mainly of creative threats directed at uncooperative machinery. The alien engineers could only watch in mounting horror as humanity's primitive methods continued to defy all expectations and achieve the impossible. The worst part wasn't just that it was working, it was that the humans were beginning to understand why it was working, and that realization was far more terrifying than anything else. With their primitive toolkit fully deployed and the alien engineers standing by, probably thinking they were keeping a safe distance, the human cadets cheerfully kicked off what they referred to as Operation Hold My Coffee, a name that made Ethan Harper's antenna curl in both fear and remembered terror. "Betting pool is now open," announced Jin Jackpot Wong, the fifth human cadet, who had up until this point been quietly calculating odds on their datapad. Current odds: 3-1 on successful repair, 5-1 on achieving unexpected sentience, and 10-1 on accidental time travel. "Put me down for 20 credits on violates at least one fundamental law of physics," shouted Sophia Turner, while simultaneously using a modified hairdryer to heat treat a quantum stabilizer. The device had definitely not been a quantum particle exciter, but someone had written the label in permanent marker anyway. Dr. Aiden Mitchell's crystalline form began to vibrate with panic. "You can't possibly expect to realign a quantum matrix using a personal grooming appliance." "Watch me," Sophia Turner grinned, twisting the hairdryer's settings from cool to reality warping. "The secret is in the ionic distribution. Plus, I swapped out the heating element with a miniaturized particle accelerator." Meanwhile, Oliver Davis and Maxwell Reed were tackling the ship's primary systems with all the subtlety of a sledgehammer trying to perform brain surgery. Ironically, that's exactly what it looked like to the horrified alien observers. "The temporal manifold is completely misaligned," Oliver Davis called out, their head buried deep inside an access panel. "Pass me the sacred combination." Maxwell Reed, looking solemn, handed over both the duct tape and the WD-40, marking the first time in galactic history that these two items had been used in conjunction with a Class 7 temporal device. A few of the alien engineers began recording final messages to their loved ones. "The quantum fluctuations are all wrong," muttered Maxwell Reed, consulting their paper notebook, which was now a mix of advanced physics theories and doodles of smiling screwdrivers. "We need to stabilize the core harmonics." "I've got just the thing!" Sophia Turner darted off to gather her supplies, returning with a rubber duck. "No!" screamed V-Law, all four arms flailing in panic. "You cannot possibly intend to use a primitive aquatic recreation device." "This isn't just any rubber duck," Oliver Davis explained patiently, already wiring the bath toy into the ship's main computer. "We modified it with a quantum resonance chamber. The squeak is now precisely tuned to the fundamental frequency of space-time." Once the duck was installed, it squeaked once, causing a minor temporal distortion that, after further analysis, would be found to have accidentally solved 3 different mathematical proofs and somehow stabilized the core harmonics to 99.8% efficiency. "That's technically better than factory specifications," Ethan Harper noted weakly. "That's impossible," Dr. Aiden Mitchell cried, frantically consulting their regulations manual. "The protocols clearly state—" They were interrupted by a loud bang, followed by Oliver Davis's triumphant "hey" as the main power core hummed back to life. "How did you restart the antimatter containment field?" demanded V-Law. "The manual clearly states it requires a carefully calibrated sequence of—" "Turned it off and on again," Oliver Davis shrugged. "Works 60% of the time, every time." The repair process continued like this, with each new solution more horrifying than the last. The humans had developed a unique rhythm. Oliver Davis would pinpoint a problem, Maxwell Reed would come up with an improbable solution, Sophia Turner would modify some household item far beyond its intended purpose, and Jin Jackpot Wong would adjust the betting odds accordingly. "The navigation system's quantum processors are completely fried," Maxwell Reed announced, examining a particularly damaged section. "No problem," said Oliver Davis, pulling out what appeared to be a game console. "We can use this to bridge the gap. I modified it to run Doom." "You can't use a primitive entertainment device to replace a Class 9 quantum navigation system," protested a junior engineer who clearly hadn't been paying attention to the past few hours. "Just grin," Sophia Turner said, already helping to wire it in. The original Doom engine is surprisingly good at calculating quantum trajectories. Plus, if you get bored during long space flights, the betting pool grew increasingly bizarre as the repairs progressed. Current odds included, achieves faster than light consciousness, accidentally invents new forms of mathematics, and makes the ship too efficient for current physics models to explain. The real trick, explained Oliver Davis to a thoroughly traumatized group of alien engineering students who couldn't look away from the mechanical madness, yet couldn't stop taking notes, is understanding that space-time is more of a suggestion than a rule, like parking tickets. Or pants, added Maxwell Reed, who was now somehow fixing a quantum uncertainty drive with absolute certainty. What truly stood out about human engineering, Ethan Harper found themselves explaining to their colleagues, was not just their ability to adapt primitive tools for advanced purposes. It was their fundamental understanding that the universe runs on duct tape, sheer stubbornness, and spite. This profound observation was punctuated by Oliver Davis smashing something with their hammer, causing the ship's AI to briefly achieve enlightenment before deciding to focus on its original task, now with a better work-life balance. Systems are at 120% efficiency, Maxwell Reed declared, clearly proud of their work. That's not possible, Dr. Aiden Mitchell shouted. You can't exceed original specifications. It violates at least 17 different laws of physics. Only 17? Oliver Davis said, looking disappointed. We must be losing our touch. Quick, hand me that rubber chicken. The alien engineers could only watch in horror as the humans proceeded to further improve the ship's efficiency, using nothing but a rubber chicken, 3 paper clips, and what they swore was the power of friendship weaponized. The truly terrifying part, V-Law whispered to Ethan Harper, is that I'm starting to get their logic, Ethan Harper said, their antenna drooping with a mix of resignation and dread. And it only gets worse from here. I'm beginning to think they might be on to something, their colleague admitted, their voice tinged with disbelief. As the repair process wore on, even the staunchest traditionalists among the alien engineers couldn't argue with the results. Where their meticulous instruments and precise calibrations had failed, humanity's chaotic methods, hit it until it works, then hit it again to make it work better, were producing unexpected success. It's like witnessing evolution in real time, mused XA, antenna twitching. If evolution had duct tape and could violate the laws of thermodynamics simply out of sheer defiance. Meanwhile, the humans had shifted to what they called the finishing touches, which involved not just making the ship functional, but improving it beyond its original design. They'd somehow boosted fuel efficiency by 300% using nothing but a modified slinky, and what they claimed was Wednesday in physical form. Ready for the final power-up sequence, Oliver Davis called, emerging from an access panel, covered in various fluids that probably shouldn't be mixed together, but had somehow triggered a stable quantum reaction anyway. The betting pool for the method of catastrophic success is now closed, Jin Jackpot Wong announced, displaying the odds on their datapad. The numbers were so wild that several alien mathematicians in the crowd fainted as the humans gathered for their final checks. Ethan Harper couldn't help but notice that despite the apparent disorder of their methods, there was an undeniable underlying logic to the madness. While alien engineering sought precision and control, human engineering embraced chaos and somehow transformed it into an art form. Professor Oliver Davis approached, holding what appeared to be a perfectly ordinary wrench. Would you like to do the honors? They asked. What does it do? Ethan Harper asked, eyeing the tool cautiously, noting how the other humans were desperately trying to suppress their grins. Oh, nothing too special, Oliver Davis said innocently. It just turns on the power and might cause a small dimensional rift. A small rift? Sophia Turner added helpfully. But only a tiny one, we promise. Maxwell Reed nodded seriously. Just a little one. Ethan Harper glanced at the wrench, then at the eager faces of their students, and finally at the ship, the one that, by all logic, shouldn't even be operational, let alone improved. With a heavy sigh, Ethan Harper made the decision that would likely be noted in their next performance review. May the sacred sprockets guide us, they muttered, accepting the wrench with all 4 hands. The universe seemed to hold its breath, likely because someone had duct taped it that way. The moment of truth arrived with all the subtlety of a quantum hiccup. Professor Ethan Harper stood before the ship's main control panel, still gripping the suspiciously ordinary wrench. The alien engineering faculty had retreated to what they calculated was a safe distance. "It isn't initiating the power-up sequence," Ethan Harper said, with the weight of someone who might accidentally create an entirely new branch of physics. "Everyone remember where we parked? Emergency response teams are on standby," reported V-Law from behind a hastily constructed energy shield. "The quantum containment unit is ready for any unexpected dimensional rifts, temporal anomalies, or spontaneous outbreaks of artificial intelligence." "Or you guys do care," Sophia Turner added, grinning as she made final adjustments to what appeared to be a toaster with a quantum flux regulator. "Do not make toast," was written on it in permanent marker. "Starting the checklist," Maxwell Reed called out, consulting their paper notebook. "Duct tape integrity holding at 157% of theoretical maximum," Jin Jackpot Wong reported, using a sensor they'd somehow rigged to measure the effectiveness of duct tape. Rubber duck quantum harmonics, squeaking at precisely the resonant frequency of spacetime. "Modified coffee maker temporal field is brewing reality with a hint of vanilla," Sophia Turner added proudly. Dr. Aiden Mitchell's crystalline form vibrated in distress. "This goes against every established protocol in the—" They were interrupted by the first system coming online. The main power core, which had been rebuilt using a mix of advanced alien technology and what the humans swore was simply good vibes, hummed to life with a sound that managed to be both normal and faintly apologetic. "Power levels at 150% of maximum capacity," Oliver Davis reported, checking readings on a device that suspiciously resembled a modified Game Boy. And somehow, the numbers were climbing. "That's impossible!" V-Law protested. "You can't exceed maximum capacity. That's why it's called maximum." "Laws of physics?" Maxwell Reed shrugged as the power levels continued to rise. "We had a chat with them earlier. Turns out they're more like guidelines anyway." One by one, systems came online. The quantum drive, now enhanced by the game console running Doom, reported faster-than-light capabilities that left several theoretical physicists in the crowd questioning their entire careers. "Temporal stabilizers online," called out Sophia Turner. "And thanks to the bendy straw modification, we're actually generating more time than we're using." "You can't generate time," wailed Dr. Aiden Mitchell. "Time is a fundamental constant of the universe." "Well, that's what the chronometer says," Oliver Davis replied, pointing to a display that was now showing several times simultaneously, including one that seemed to be next Tuesday. With the navigation system powered by the unholy alliance of rubber bands and paper clips, the accuracy was so astonishing that it appeared the system wasn't so much calculating routes through space as it was politely asking space to rearrange itself more conveniently. "Artificial intelligence, check," Maxwell Reed announced. "Online." Har Russ paused, looking at the readings. "It's developed a sense of humor, but it's using it responsibly." "That's new," Sophia Turner commented. "Usually they either have no humor or decide to take up cosmic stand-up comedy." The ship's engines, reassembled using WD-40 and what the humans called percussive calibration, were now producing power readings, suggesting that they weren't defying the laws of physics so much as ignoring them with ease. "Final system check," Oliver Davis called out. "Professor Bright Wrench, if you do the honors." Ethan Harper looked at the wrench in their hands, then at their students' eager faces, and finally at their fellow faculty members who were still hiding behind shields. With all four arms, they gripped the wrench and turned it exactly 3/4 clockwise, just as instructed. The ship purred. There was no other word for it. Every system, from the quantum core to the coffee maker, now an integral component of the temporal stabilization matrix, hummed in perfect harmony. The rubber duck squeaked once more. Once the minor reality fluctuation caused by the ship's power-up sequence accidentally solved world hunger on 3 different planets. All systems are not only operational, but operating at approximately 300% of their original specifications, Jin Jackpot Wong reported, consulting their datapad. "Also, I believe we may have accidentally invented a new form of mathematics, but that might just be a rounding error." The alien engineers emerged from behind their shield, their senses confirming what their belief systems had been refusing to accept. The ship wasn't just fixed. It was better than new. Their precision instruments now showed efficiency ratings that shouldn't have been possible, achieved through methods that shouldn't have worked, using tools that shouldn't have been anywhere near advanced technology. "How?" whispered Velaw, staring at the readings that suggested the ship could now probably outperform the entire Academy's test fleet. "How is this possible?" "Simple," Oliver Davis said, affectionately patting the ship's hull. "We just asked ourselves, what would duct tape do?" In apparent agreement, the ship adjusted its own efficiency rating to 31% higher, just because it could. In the wake of the successful repair, or what the humans simply referred to as giving physics a friendly suggestion, the landing pad fell into a silence so profound, it could almost qualify as a new state of matter. The alien engineers stood frozen, their various sensory organs trying to process what they had just witnessed, while their brains filed formal protests against reality itself. "Well," Oliver Davis said casually, wiping quantum grease off their hands with a rag that might have once been a piece of space-time. "Anyone up for lunch? I hear the cafeteria is serving entropy today." "Can't," replied Sophia Turner, who was still admiring the way their modified coffee maker had somehow achieved symbiosis with the ship's temporal core. "I promised to help the physics department explain why their fundamental constants keep changing during our repair." "Oh yeah," Maxwell Reed nodded, consulting their notebook. "It now contains several theories that might win Nobel Prizes if anyone can understand the coffee stains. Apparently, we broke causality 3 times. New personal record." At that precise moment, the Academy Director, TAC Prime, coordinator of all knowledge worth knowing, arrived. Their entrance was heralded by horrified gasps, suggesting they had just received several hundred urgent messages about unauthorized reality modifications. "What is going on here?" they began, their voice achieving a pitch that made quantum particles nervous. "In the name of all that is logically consistent, what is happening?" "Successful repair job," Oliver Davis answered cheerfully. "We even added a few improvements. The ship can now technically arrive at its destination before it leaves, but we recommend not using that feature without proper supervision." "And a cup of coffee," added Sophia Turner. "The temporal navigation system runs better when caffeinated." TAC Prime's multiple ice stalks swiveled between the impossibly functional ship, the still shocked engineering faculty, and the humans, who were now discussing lunch options as though they hadn't just rewritten several laws of physics. How did you learn to do this?" TAC Prime finally managed to ask. "Oh, you know," Oliver Davis shrugged nonchalantly. "Standard Earth engineering training. Start with a bicycle at age 5, move up to the family hover truck by 12, and by 16, you're rebuilding quantum cores in your garage, with supervision," added Maxwell Reed helpfully. "Usually," amended Sophia Turner, "the garage part is optional. Some of us use the kitchen," clarified Jin Jackpot Wong. TAC Prime's ice stalks twisted into shapes that suggested an imminent existential crisis. "Are you telling me that human children routinely practice quantum engineering with household tools?" "Well, not officially," Oliver Davis said. "Officially, we were just tinkering. But you'd be surprised how similar a quantum manifold is to a broken toaster once you get the basics down. The basics being, hit it until it works, then hit it again for good luck," chorused the humans. That was when Professor Ethan Harper, who had been quietly revising their teaching methodology, made a decision that would later be regarded as either a brilliant move or a terrible mistake, depending on who you asked. "Director," they said, using all 4 arms to gesture at the hyper-efficient ship, now humming a tune suspiciously similar to "Don't Stop Believin'. I believe we need to implement a new course at the Academy." And that was how human engineering, advanced applications of primitive solutions, became the most popular and feared course in the curriculum. The only entry requirement was an assigned waiver acknowledging that neither the Academy nor its staff were responsible for any violations of physical laws, temporal paradoxes, or spontaneous achievements of consciousness by household appliances. The course came with only one major rule, displayed prominently in every workshop in glowing letters, tinged with nervous energy. Under no circumstances are humans permitted to use the phrase, "hold my coffee," without proper supervision and emergency containment protocols. This rule was promptly annotated by human students to read, unless it would be really funny. As for the repaired ship, it went on to have a distinguished career in the Galactic Fleet, though it did develop a few quirks. It insisted on running doom during faster-than-light travel, occasionally produced toast when executing complex quantum calculations, and had a strange habit of arriving at its destination exactly 3 seconds before it was actually needed. The rubber duck became a required component in all future starship designs, though no one could ever explain why. Some say it was because of its quantum harmonics. Others suggested it was simply good company during long space flights, and somewhere in the Academy's official documentation, under Approved Engineering Methodologies, there now exists a section simply titled Uncore TSU Uncore, which somehow became the most cited reference in modern spaceship repair manuals.